So welcome everybody to session 5 of the growth cycle training. And we are going to be talking mostly about three color stuff today. And so over to you, Shane.
Thanks, Bill. Yeah, so let's just get into the next slide there. And
Okay.
so we've had a chance so far in the sessions to talk about the principles and the processes. We've had a chance to understand some things about how to conduct the church survey and how to the debrief works, and a little bit about barrier identification, mainly focused around the church survey. Today's going to focus on the wide and rich range of three-color discipleship resources that are available. We're going to focus on two in particular as examples: the wholeness test and the empowerment test. And you'll get an overview of those, as well as some of the kind of foundational stuff around the three-color resources, and a very, very high level overview of some of the other tests that are available. So that's going to be what we're on to today. So this is all about kind of how we apply NCD in a smaller group setting, group discipleship, one-on-one discipleship, or as an individual. So for the check-in today, what we're going to do is ask you to nominate somebody from your group to report back. And I think we're going to set you up probably in groups of 4-ish. And we'll ask you to invite somebody to report back from your checkout for this session. But then we'd like a different person for each of the subsequent sessions as well. So we have a few more voices around the table at the check-in, checkouts, and the breakouts today. Okay. So the check-in question today is: what have you learned or experienced applying NCD's growth principles in your personal life, either through this program that we've been working through, or by taking one of the three-color discipleship tests, if you've taken one of the tests already? Okay, so I think we're going to give you 7 minutes plus a bonus minute in your groups, and we'll look forward to seeing you and hearing what you've had to say on the other side. Let's start with room 2. So who's reporting back from room 2? That's the room I wasn't in.
I think that's me
Okay.
reporting back. Um, so I think everybody in our group had taken at least one of the tests. Um, I think we were talking a bit about the language and how um, perhaps it could be seen as a bit negative, kind of the idea of a cloud over your life.
Hmm.
And it felt like we were being told to start from somewhere negative and work towards somewhere positive. That's what some of our group kind of said. And obviously, a lot of our answers are based on our personal circumstances. And so, I mean, you could take the test at different points in your life, and based on where you are in your life, the answers could be very different. And so it might be helpful in some context to have people to help you interpret what you're looking at, because I guess in the wrong hands, it could be considered quite damaging. Um, but then some people in our group said that the tests were helpful, and particularly with the graphics, having that visualization um, is a good thing to have. And I think a couple of people in our groups weren't surprised particularly by the results because they already have that kind of self-knowledge, so that being told you're a patient person when they already know that their patient is, I guess, an affirming thing, but not necessarily a surprising thing. So I think that's kind of what we were talking about.
Yeah, great. So it sounds like you're mostly talking about the wholeness test. People have done the wholeness
I think
test.
so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Yeah, and uh, I'm not sure, Bill, if the adjustments to the wholeness test are they up and running now?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. There was a change in some of the descriptions that was made not too long ago. So you might notice a difference if you've done the test, let's say last year sometime versus now. There's been some updates to some of the language. And group one, Dawn. I was in that group, so I know Dawn's going to report back for us.
Don't remember agreeing to that. I thought Ruben was.
We were. You're right, Dawn. I've written some things down. I'll say them. You'll be glad to know that you're getting it right, because apparently somebody in my group, their partner said it was completely correct. So don't worry, Shane and Bill, you are on the right track, is all we wanted to feedback. We valued, there's comments on valuing the questions that the report gives on the wholeness test. Interestingly, it picked up for one of our group members ways in which context is shown, because we had a member who'd retired, so it picked up things that they used to do that they don't do anymore, that they used to do in their working life. So the context of when you take the test, we had a discussion about that, how it might change at different chapters of our life. Yeah, that was about us really.
Okay, great. That's good. That's good that some people have had a chance to experience the test and have some recognition of how it's affirming, or how it's sort of revealing some information. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about the wholeness test and the empowerment test as we go along. But let's keep going. Are you going to share this?
Yep.
Slides, Bill. Perfect.
Sorry about that. I got lost here. There we are.
Yep. Good. So today, some goals to think about, to keep in mind as we move along. So we're going to talk a little bit about Trinitarian balance again. This came up in one of our earlier sessions, but we're just going to refresh on that briefly. Knowing to know the foundations for discipleship and three-color discipleship, and to be able to identify the 8 character development discipleship areas that we'll be touching on very briefly and focusing on a couple. We'll be familiar with 2 of the discipleship tests, the wholeness test in particular, and the empowerment test. And understand, we'll touch also on how to practically apply the growth cycle that we've been talking about in the last couple sessions as it relates to the church survey. Another refresh on how to apply that in an individual discipleship, one-on-one or small group setting. And we'll also talk a little bit about where to start with 3-color tests. And what we hope you'll be able to lean into through this session in particular is discernment and faith as we move through these processes, to understand and lean into releasing gifts that we may have, and also empowering others. So let's talk a little bit about balance, and then I'm going to hand it over to Bill, and he's going to talk about the rock. So we've talked a little bit about Trinitarian balance before, and so we have this picture of the Trinitarian compass here, and 6 biblical characters that we might relate to that are sort of reflective of 6 parts of the Trinitarian compass. And the key thing that we kind of want to take away from this information is that, if we are a Martha type character, someone who's really focused on doing, we don't want to take away from the red that we have on that part of the Trinitarian compass. What we want to do is add a little more blue and green. So add a little more of Thomas, or a little more of Mary, or a little more of Jonah, and in that way become a little bit more balanced, and that will help us to lean into some of the strengths that we might have that are a little bit underdeveloped, or where we have opportunities to develop them. So the way to balance is not through subtraction, but by addition. And the whole goal here is to, unlock strengths that we might have that are just, blocked a little bit or underutilized. We've all got the same muscles in our bodies, but some of us like to use certain muscles a little bit more frequently. We've all got certain capacities in all parts of the compass, but if we take a little bit of time to exercise ones that we maybe aren't as naturally inclined to do, then we can, develop those strengths and bring us into more balance. Bill, is there anything you'd like to add? If not, I'll hand the next.
I just added the Trinitarian compass is really about our relationship with each of the three persons of the Trinity. So God the Father, God the Redeemer, and God the Holy Spirit. And as we come into more balanced relationship with all three, we start to enter into that light and that the Godhead. We don't become gods, but we become closer and closer and more part of God. And so that is the essence of the Trinitarian compass, and then the head, hands, and hearts. As Martha's a hands person, Mary's a heart person, Thomas is a head, and then there's the other three biblical characters on the cusp. That's all I would add there. Okay, I just want to respond a little bit to some of the check-in feedback. We start. NCD has been accused of starting from the negative in the past, certainly, so it's not new feedback for us, because the minimum factor has always been the place we start. Increasingly, though, we have started to realize, no, we start at our strengths. So as even with the examples Shane just gave, we start, if we're a red person, we start from our redness. We don't get upset about being redder. Or maybe imbalanced in red. All of us are imbalanced somewhere on the Trinitarian compass, and so this idea of adding, and so we start at the positive, and what does God like about us? How does God delight in us? What has He given us already, etc. And then be invited to add other, as opposed to how are we losers? And I know we've also heard the feedback about the cloud can sound kind of negative, especially for people who are under a cloud. That sense of sort of accepting it versus trying to remove it, and so I know there's lots of stuff there. Yes, it will. Most of the tests will vary by when you take them in life. Some more so than others. I think especially the empowerment test, very position responsive. Maybe the gift test a little less so. And then the final thing I heard in that was maybe it's a good idea to have someone alongside you to be interpreting them and or working through them. And we're going to talk a lot about how to coach someone or mentor someone or mutually mentor one another in this idea. And this idea of mutually discipling one another is at the very heart of today's session. That's what the three color tests are all about: discipling one another on that process of ongoing discipleship. So that's where we're going to start today. So this building on the rock, the way of true life. Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And so if you look at those 8 quality characteristics across the bottom, so you're now pretty familiar with the 8 quality characteristics, or I call them the 8 discipleship areas. They're the same thing. So empowering leadership, gift-based ministry, passionate spirituality, effective structures, inspiring worship, holistic small groups, how we are in community together, the wholeness test or the evangelism test, and the love and love. Those characteristics, those are the characteristics of healthy churches, but they're also the character of Christ. God, Christ, the Godhead, is empowering, is gift activating, invites passion, expects stewarding of time, treasure, and talent, and so on and so on. And so if our ministry and mission is not built on those, we'll be missing the point. So all the strategies and the sermons and the retreats that we have and outreach programs and partnering and calling people or appointing people or governance and small group materials, all that stuff, if it's not built on the rock, is going to be off color, I guess, for lack of a better term. And so this idea of those we do all those things, but we need to keep focused on what's core, and it is God's growth principles and the character of God, and that's how our churches and we as individuals take on the character of Christ, and how our small groups do, and our communities and our churches do, and so on. And so this idea of building on the rock, I am working out my own salvation in some respects. I'm that salvation of self. I am working as a co-worker with God on my salvation. Yes, there's a permanent, long-term, eternal version of the salvation equation, but there's also that process that I'm in right now, saving myself, saving my close friends, saving my marriage. Does my marriage need saving? Yes. It doesn't mean my marriage is on the rocks. It means it continually needs to be worked on. So does my small group. So does my congregation. So does the communities I live in and the groups I live in. So this ongoing salvation, discipleship of myself, discipleship of my group that I'm in, not me discipling down to them, but working in the group with them, etc. So this idea of the point of this picture is I start at me, and then I move out from me, and I so if I'm saving myself and Shane is saving himself, we can co-work on helping to save one another, and etc. And so the language of saving myself can sound a little weird, but there is that activity of self-discipling, and then we can even get into the salvation of the church. And so on. So this is structure. This is part of what an effective structure is. This idea of I work on me, I work on the people that are close to me, the people I love, the people that are in my oikos, and right out into the world. And so if we build on these foundations, these building blocks, the true rock, the true life, we will see fruit from that. And so that's where we see holistic small groups, and so this idea that this discipling goes on in community, and we are co-discipling one another or mentoring one another, and so back to your point about being mentored, when I'm using these tests, they're ideally set up for that, and so maybe Shane's working on becoming a more empowering leader, and I'm working on becoming a more inspiring worshiper. And being more inspired and inspiring. He knows which questions to ask me. I know which questions to have to ask him, and so on. Or my wife and I are both working on something. We might be both working on the same character area or different ones, and so on. So the wholeness of the character of Christ, as I say, these 8 quality characteristics, just a different picture of the same phenomenon. This idea that God is, well, loved and loving at the top right, empowered and empowering. God is inspired and inspiring. And so some of you have seen this diagram before. This sort of ED/ING naming convention isn't pretty. When you get down to stewarded and stewarding, identified and identifying, evangelized and evangelizing, impassioned and impassioning. The ED/ING naming convention doesn't necessarily work beautifully. But this idea that God is all 8 of these things, in an ED sense, he cares for people. He's cared for. I'm cared for, and I care for others. I'm loved, and I'm loving. I'm empowered, and I'm empowering. So as I grow into these 8 discipleship areas, I am growing into the character of Christ. And so you see how the 8 discipleship or the 8 quality characteristics, while they originally defined the character of a healthy church, you can see that they've grown over the last 30 years into becoming way more than just, this is how you define a healthy church, and this is what the church survey measures. That's where the 8 quality characteristics came from in the original research and how they were first used. But as the paradigm has expanded and advanced, we've seen, no, this is much more than just how do you define a healthy church. This is how do you define the character of a Christ follower, And how do you actually, on some levels, how do you define Christ himself? Again, loved and loving, empowered and empowering, and so on. And so these 8 discipleship areas, and therefore the 8 discipleship tests, are going at exactly the same thing that the church survey is. How do we figure out what part of that Trinitarian compass is in deficit and what we need to add? So again, I worry when it's seen as a negative thing and we're starting from the negative, and that's some of the hangover of the early days of NCD, when it was, yes, you start at the minimum factor. We didn't spend enough energy talking about, and what are your strengths? And so now all of the NCD language starts at what does God like about you? What does God like about your church? Well, gift-based ministry is really strong and empowering leadership is really strong. And what areas could be worked on? And God loves you the way you are. You are enough. I love saying this to congregations. You are enough in a world where everybody's telling you aren't enough. You're not smart enough. You're not good enough looking. You don't have enough money. You just are not enough. And God loves us just the way we are. We are enough. And he loves us so much that he doesn't want us to get stuck there. He also wants us to grow to become more like him. And so this idea that we are enough and we need to grow, that's a positive correlation, not a negative one. So there are 8 discipleship areas. There are 8 discipleship tests. So this slide's pretty busy. I don't want you to sort of worry about catching it all before I move on to the next slide. But there's a love test, there's an effectiveness test or stewardship test, there's a wholeness test, inspiration, gift activation, empowerment, passion, community. And there are clouds. When Adam presents this, he talks about this is heaven on earth and hell on earth. Hell on earth is when we're not loving and we're not effective in our structures, and we aren't living the full life or wholeness. We suffer damage, we suffer destruction, emptiness, suffocation, stuntedness, oppression, apathy, isolation. And so there are repercussions for not becoming more like Jesus. If we do not grow to be into that Christ-like character, we will suffer, and others around us will suffer. And so, for instance, if I'm looking at empowerment, third from the right, the Trinitarian balance, we're going to talk a lot more about this one later on, but the Trinitarian balance in empowerment is liberation, motivation, and explanation. So the green is the training. It's the sort of the cognitive part of empowerment. So as a bank manager, I was pretty good at explaining things and training people and explaining how things work. I was fairly good at motivating people. Come on, let's go. And, we're all in this together, so on and so on. So that the red part is the doing. Let's go do. My deficit area was blue. It is typically for me and most of the tests. But this isn't about me. All of us, as I say, come from a different place on the Trinitarian compass, from a different place of imbalance. But the blue was the liberating part. That was okay, go out and try some stuff, make some mistakes. I was very limited in my capacity for letting people go and try stuff, and maybe a bit of a micromanager and an overmanager and controlling. And so for me, the add there, the invitation to grow is to add blue, become more of a liberator, and so on. And all of the tests are designed the same way. The love test is about truth, justice, and grace over on the left. And so these clouds, I know that we may be needing to work on, we've only been using the cloud language for about a year now. We maybe need to do some work on the cloud imagery. But this idea that there are repercussions when you're not completely in the light, you are partially in the darkness. And so it's light that dispels darkness, and so on. So I wanted to show you this slide at the front end so you can see how the 8 fit together, that there are 8 tests, there are 8 Trinitarian balances, and there are 8 sort of repercussions. So we're going to talk today about the wholeness test, and we're going to talk about the empowerment test. So the wholeness, I've already talked about the empowerment test and the Trinitarian balance in empowering leadership. In wholeness, this is the aligns with the quality characteristic need-oriented evangelism. And you might say, well, why isn't it called the evangelism test? And we'll talk about that in more detail. But the life to the full is about embracing relationships, purposeful contribution, and unshakable confidence. I think almost all of you have done the wholeness test. So you've seen some of that. And again, it will tell you which one of those is your strongest and what area around that Trinitarian compass you're being invited to work more on. So health includes belonging, meaning, and identity. When we talk about wholeness, we talk about, when we're talking about it at the individual level in the wholeness test, we're talking about embracing relationships. When we talk about the green area in the NCD church survey, we talk about fellowship. And in red, in the personal, we talk about purposeful contribution. And in the church survey, we talk about service. Again, meaning what am I here to do? What's my purpose? How do I add value? Identity, in the blue, in the church survey, it's called faith. And in the wholeness test for individuals, it's called unshakable confidence. And so that isn't unshakable confidence in myself or faith in myself. It's how do I get my identity as I connect with the Holy Spirit, with the Trinity, and that sense of whose I am, who am I becoming, and that idea of. So you see behind all of these is these, and I think you could argue that any person on earth, whether they're a follower of Jesus or not, or whether they have any faith or not, they still are looking for belonging. They have been created to be in community, whether they know it or not, or whether they like people or not, or whether they're self-isolating, or they've been damaged so much that they're isolated. There is that inner hunger for belonging. And again, a sense of meaning. What am I here for? I mean, these are the big existential questions. And who am I? Who am I becoming? Whose am I? Again, not all seculars, people or atheists are going to be asking that, but they are trying to figure out who they are. I mean, you look at a teenager, they're working at becoming who they are supposed to become. Who am I? I'm not like my parents. I'm a lot like my friends. No, I'm not like Sally today, et cetera. That sense of figuring out who we are. And so these questions, I was going to say plague us throughout life. They don't plague us. They are the ongoing quests for life in all its fullness. And again, whether people know Jesus or they don't, they still have these longings for belonging, meaning, and identity. So we're going to send you back out into breakout groups, I think maybe a little smaller this time, and ask you to just talk amongst yourselves which color of the Trinitarian compass feels strongest in you right now. Maybe you already have a sense of that, not having done a Trinitarian test, and just from the discussion, and some of you may have more insight into that, having done some of the tests. How might growing in the missing color help you move toward greater balance, wholeness, or deeper relationship with God, or more into the light? And what's one practical way you could intentionally strengthen that missing color in the coming weeks? So Shane will put those into, or has put those into the chat. Are there any questions before we go out to the breakout? Okay. Who's speaking on behalf of Group 1? Darren, Doug, Jane, Ruben.
I am.
Doug.
So we spent most of the time trying to figure out whether we were answering the question or not. And so it was a little bit, I think I discussed with a little bit more about character traits and some of the questions, how I'd answer them. The color, one of the questions was, one test you're in one color and another test you might be in a different color. Is that okay? Or is that good? Or and so, but I think the main thing I've been getting out, some of us were saying, is that they're a little bit different than personality tests. They tend to be character tests, and so they give us things to work on, to strengthen, and that's probably the helpful part of it is what to work on as far as character, but trying to figure out the color we were a little bit puzzled on.
Group 2, Don, Joe, Steve.
Steve,
Who's speaking on behalf of group 2? Joe?
Me, when I can actually finally unmute myself.
Okay, great.
Well, we looked at for each of us which were our strengths and which were the areas that we needed to grow in. But we felt that with all of us, they have that problem of not feeling rooted in a community. And if you're not actually rooted, then growth becomes quite hard. We also looked at things saying that the results were very black and white, and perhaps we needed to look more at the nuance in there, and perhaps look at interpreting it with people who perhaps know you very well. But if you're not rooted in a community, that's quite hard to find. So they were just the main points.
Okay, thanks. And group 3, Dominic, Elizabeth, and Ricardo.
I think it's me this time. I managed to dodge every other week, so it's my turn finally. We, all three of us, in our own ways, said that we were confused and didn't quite understand our results of a wholeness test, and that we were perplexed, didn't understand all these kind of words we used, which was interesting. How each one of us had felt the same kind of way about different results. They just didn't seem to make sense. I think that's what Ricardo said, and that's actually what we'd kind of said, what Dominic and I'd said too. We decided to give ourselves a break and not beat ourselves up about the results, and maybe find a way of looking at them that's more prayerful. But for instance, mine, it's talking about delegation again. Actually, that's something I probably could do looking at. But when I first had my result, I actually felt a bit grumpy. I only had it for 5 minutes as I just started, but just felt a bit like that's not me. But maybe I just need to, as I say, black and white, something different. But we all had the same response, which is really interesting.
Cool. Thank you for the feedback and insights. A few things, and I don't want to sound defensive. I want to build on some of the questions that you're having about them. You're right. These are not personality tests. They are growth tests, character tests, and they are not meant to define who you are and where you are forever. So let's say I'm taking the Myers-Briggs. I'm an ENS, and I forget what I am, ENSJ, let's say. I've probably labeled up myself that forever and think that's where I'm working from, and everybody else should sort of understand that that's who I am. This is not that. This is designed for you to grow out of where you are, even though you're good enough and whole enough to be loved by God as you are. But he, as I say, loves you so much that he wants you to grow. And so this idea that, so I may not change much in my gifting, but I may change a whole lot in my empowerment test. The part about which color am I find that on most tests, I am typically green-red. But I've taken the passionate spirituality test 4 or 5 times over the last 10 years, and I've moved around on it. And the teaching on the passionate spirituality stuff was that you have a dominant style, you have a sort of a mother tongue style, and that will be who you are for life. And I have found that it's not true, and that's okay. One test I took it, I was really blue. I'd been working a lot on becoming more blue, and I took the test, and it's self-evaluation. So it's how I'm feeling today. I had onions for breakfast. Maybe I don't feel the same as I did yesterday. So yeah, they vary, and while they do put you in boxes and they do provide labels for things, they're not meant to label you. They're meant to give you somewhere to start from in your dialogue with yourself, your dialogue with God, your dialogue with others. And so I would say one of the things I've learned in my experience of NCD over the last 18 years, well, almost 20 years I've been at it when I was a coach in my denomination. These tests and these surveys and all of this is just meant to be conversation starters. They're not meant to be accurate to the nearest decimal place. So even in your quality characteristic in your church survey, and if you score a 42.0, who cares if it's a 42.0 or a 42.1? That's not the point. They are accurate in that they will help you get to the conversation you need to have. They are not accurate to the nearest decimal place. And so I think, giving ourselves some freedom to, I'll step into this. This is an invitation into a conversation, again, with my inner self, with God, and with other people. Trying to figure out who we are. How do I belong? Where do I belong? What impedes me from belonging? Where do I have meaning and purpose? And how am I helping other people to find meaning in their lives? and what might be impeding that, and how am I growing in my identity? And maybe that's identifying who I already am. Maybe it's identifying who I'm becoming. And I was just talking with Adam last week, and he's really on a zone right now about this becoming stuff. He even would suggest that Jesus is still becoming, even in heaven, and sitting at the right hand of the Father. And I thought, whoa, that sounds a little weird. But this idea, and he said, well, if a new person comes into a relationship with Jesus, does Jesus change? Yes. If when I come into a new relationship with Doug and Elizabeth, I become different. My identity isn't just my own. It's defined communally. And so this idea that Jesus is changing, or a new person's born. Now, I don't know, but this idea that we are we are and we are becoming, I think is really, really formational and transformational. And so that idea, yes, if you're not rooted in a community, this can be hard work to do. One of the things Adam's working on is trying to build a system where you can find someone to work with. And they may not be in Glasgow, or they may not be in Toronto, or they may not be in Belfast. Maybe they're in Sydney. But trying to find people that are also working on becoming more like Jesus, and better followers, whatever language you want to use, growing in character. And so, yeah, there. I took a little longer on that than I meant to, but we'll keep going. So, using the wholeness on our journey to fullness. So this is a guided process. It's definitely designed to help you get a big picture where your life is on the journey to fullness, and where the lives of others in your care are on the journey to their fullness. And so this as with all of the Trinitarian compasses, all 8 of them, they're about who you are and who you're helping others become. And so they shine a light into that, so that you can see the light of Christ. Work on your minimum factor, and within your sphere of influence, and because you not only have a cloud over you, but that you have a collective cloud, but your cloud is also casting shadow on other people. And so I don't want people to get discouraged by the cloud. And I know people who, some of the feedback we've had since this test's only a year old, so it's still evolving. Have said, the imagery of cloud can be really depressing for people who are in depression. And so this idea that part of me says for relatively healthy people, the idea of being able to get rid of the cloud may be the conversation we need to have. And I recognize fully that there may be some people for whom the cloud image is really discouraging, and they can't understand the idea of getting out from under their cloud, et cetera. So I know that all of that stuff exists in the conversation. And then the empowerment test, and this is why we picked these 2, rather than try to go into all 8. When I've tried to introduce all 8 at once, it just becomes really overwhelming. So we've started with these 2. You don't have to do them in this order. You don't even have to do these 2. But we think there's some real value in these 2 being first. Because, interestingly, the empowerment test, they're all relational. Every one of the 8 discipleship areas is relational. But empowerment and love and the holistic test, the community test, they're more relational even than the other. But the empowerment test, and you notice it's 360 feedback. It's just looking at what people think about how you empower them. So this as you work on becoming a more empowering leader, it'll have more impact into the other areas of your ministry than any other. And it's also probably, I think, the easiest to do something about quickly. In my experience, not just in my own, but with other people, is when you work on the empowerment test and try to become a more empowering leader, you will start to see places where you can apply the things you're learning very quickly. And so this idea that the empowerment test is a quick wins test in some respects and will produce lots of value out into the other things that you do and the places where you minister and the work you do with other people. So how fulfilling is your life? This is the big question. So as I already explained in the church survey, if you've reviewed a summary guide in the NCD result guides or NRGs, you will see in the summary guide, the very first picture, I call it the 30,000 foot view. Where are we on fellowship, service, and faith? That's not NCD's definition of church. Churches are about fellowship, they are about service, and they are about faith. Those are sort of the three big pillars. We happen to have input into each of those from a Trinitarian compass perspective. And the personal test is exactly the same. Embracing relationships, purposeful contribution, and unshakable confidence. They're the same. And so, as I say, we've only had the wholeness test for a year, the one on the right, but we've had the NCD Church Survey for almost 30 years. The integration of them and the correlation between them is just, I think, kind of breathtaking. And the wholeness test was not even thought of 30 years ago, and yet it holds together so well. I think speaks to the paradigm. So, embracing relationships, purposeful contribution, and unshakable confidence. I think we've talked about this quite a bit already. How am I embraceable, and how am I embracing of other people? How much am I? What kind of purpose do I have in the contribution that I'm making? How do I? And so in the discipleship areas, you would see gift-based ministry here. You would see effective structures here, and some of evangelism. That sort of what's my purpose? How do I bring meaning to my life? How do I use what God's given me for building up the body of Christ if I'm in a community of faith? The unshakable confidence is, as I said, not about self-aggrandizement. It's about, I have an unshakable confidence because I know whose I am and I know what I'm about. My identity is rooted in Christ. Not 100% yet, but on the way to becoming. And so again, that sense of growth and who am I becoming? Who am I? What things can I lean on in my identity that are strong and unshakable, determinant? And back to embracing relationships, just that sense of how do I, so those are loving relationships, holistic small groups, and embracing empowering leadership. How do I empower others? How do I love others? How do I care for others? And how do I let people care for me? How do I let people love me? How do I open up and expose the kind of love that I need and let people into that, and so on. So there's the inner and the outer element to all of these. So the clouds. Are there any questions before we get to that anything that I've talked about so far? Because we've covered a lot of ground there. Everybody's clear. Okay. I'm going to hold you to this. This was your chance. Okay, we'll keep going. We're going to talk about the clouds. So those of you who took the test more than a few months ago will have had the clouds named a certain way. And because this test is evolving, we've had over about 1,500 people take it, I think, at this point in the last year. But it's changed a little bit. Those of you who've taken the test will have new names for the clouds. And so we talked to Adam about this, and why he's renamed them and so on, and what they mean. So there are 6 clouds. So you will have been given the area on the Trinitarian compass that is producing the most fullness in your life, or the most wholeness. And then you'll also have been presented a cloud that you're under, something that's impeding the light from getting through. And these are now called unpartnered strength, unchecked authority, unharnessed capacity, untethered identity, unsettled resolve, and unshared burden. And so when Adam first suggested he was going to change the names of the clouds, I thought, oh, great. Just when we've gotten used to them, I'm relatively fluent in the first 6 namings. we've been working with people using them. But isn't this just the best? And I sort of railed against them being renamed. But then he explained why he was renaming them, and then we had quite a long discussion with him about what the names mean and why they were changed and so on. And so he's added the previous names. And so just to back up, the what he's come to the conclusion is that self-importance, and that's not, oh, I'm very important. It's more, I'm maybe holding my authority or my role a little too tightly, and I'm sort of over concerned about my job or my role or my mandate or my purpose there. So the cloud is unchecked authority. The shadow that it produces is self-importance. Maybe another one. I have unpartnered strength. I feel a little isolated. And so the cloud or what's impeding the light being shone in the light of Christ being shone fully into my life is causing isolation. Again, over here, I've got lots and lots of capacity, but it's not getting connected. And so I sometimes feel a little pointless. So the old cloud names, which you see around the outside, are really shadows more than they are clouds. But the other primary reason he wanted to change the names of the clouds, and I hope this isn't just sort of sounding really very technical for you. I hope it's helping you in working through your results. And to that point, if you took the test a long time ago, or a year ago or so, you might want to retake it so that you get the new names. But you'll also get these slides if you want to use them for reference. The other reason for changing the names was when they were the original first names, isolation, self-importance, pointlessness, and so on, they had almost a tone of this is your identity, this is what you are, and it's your fault. And you're responsible for solving it. And what Adam wanted to introduce back into the paradigm was that this isn't something you do alone. How you are shaped and what clouds you're under and how you experience God and God's fullness and wholeness in your life it's partially something you're doing, but it's also something that the community is doing. And so the community, how you've been raised, what kind of home you came from, what kind of Sunday school you went to, or Sabbath school, or what kind of church you belong to, or what kind of company you work for, or what kind of marriage you're in or have been in. All of those things will have shaped you. And so there's a communal element, but the community has responsibility for what you're becoming, so do you. And the community has responsibility for helping you deal with your cloud, as do you. So you have agency, and so does the community. And so that's why the unpartnered, unchecked, unharnessed, untethered, unsettled, unshared, that they've been the clouds now have a communal element to them as well. So that's a lot to say about wholeness. I don't know if that makes it clearer or less clear. Any thoughts or questions? Dominic, you look like you want to ask a question. No? No? Okay. Any thoughts on the renaming of them? You're a quiet bunch today.
Okay, I could say something on the renaming.
Okay, thanks, Doug.
No, I think the renaming one's helpful in that when I scored my cloud was mistrust, I said, I'm a trusting guy. I don't think that's right. But then when I went to the explanation, it said, you got a team out there that is ready to help you, but you don't take advantage of that. And I said, okay, well, that I can agree with. I tend to, in times of pressure, say I'm going to do it myself. And so now it says it's an unshared burden. That to me gets closer to where my issue is. And then I also found other people, when they got the self-importance one, kind of took a bit of offense of that. Does that mean that I'm proud or but when it says unchecked authority, I think that's a little bit more communal, a little bit more easier to take on. So I think I want to look at it because I've just done the Old Test, and so I'm just seeing these titles now, and but I think they're helpful.
Interestingly, my wife Marnie has the cloud of mistrust as well. And actually, she identified quite comfortably with that and could name all the reasons why she's not terribly trusting. Some of it to do with family of origin, some of it to do with first marriage, really defining aspects of her life. But yeah, that's how she experienced unshared. And so it's interesting. I don't know whether she won't share burden because she doesn't trust people to take it, or she doesn't share burden because she hasn't been able to trust people in a long time. So yeah, I mean, but wow, what a conversation to have, and if I'm working with Marnie, then those are the conversations I need to step into. I've just been reminded by Shane that we're about 13 minutes behind, so we probably should move along. So working out my salvation, this idea that I have to save myself, well, I'm working with God in the saving of myself. And so on page 8 of your wholeness test, you will see on the left-hand side, you'll see that these are the things that are strong in you. So my strongest suit was embracing relationships. These are the things God delights in me. And on the right-hand side, these are the areas where I could grow. And so because my profile was produced a long time ago, it came up with pointless. These are the discipleship things I can work on. These are the things I could be asking other people to help me with. Bill, how are you going at prioritizing what will most help others? Bill, how are you working at showing others how to do things? Bill, how are you paying attention to what others are trying to say to you, etc.? The 3-color test, there is a QR code. The test is free. You can invite anybody to take it. They don't have to know Jesus or even be interested in the faith to step into this test. They just want to have a life that's full and have belonging and meaning and identity. Then this would be the test for them. And then you can start having conversations about life to the full. Doug's doing some work with some of the youth in Belfast around potentially using this as a bit of an evangelism tool. Okay, we're going to talk about the empowerment test now. This is about releasing leaders, helping other people. I guess it's really about growing more leaders in some respects. And you don't have to be a leader to take this test. Just if you are an empowerer or you have influence, if you are a leader by definition. And so this is about disciple making disciples, or making disciples making disciples. Freedom, maturity.
You're not sharing your slides at the moment.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. So the 3 colors of leadership, there's not all of the 8 discipleship areas have a book. 5 of them do. This one does. So if you're interested in learning more about this, you can get a copy of the 3 colors of leadership by Christian Schwartz. And then I'm going to talk to you about the Trinitarian balance of empowering leadership. So empowering leadership comes, we first learned about it in the NCD church survey. So questions like, our leaders are clearly concerned for people who do not know Jesus Christ. Our leaders are good at explaining things. The leaders of our church concentrate on the tasks for which they are gifted. So those are the questions that we see in the NCD church survey. So they will give you some insight to how we define empowering leadership. As you become a more empowering leader, the more other areas of your ministry improve. As I say, this one has a lot. As you improve as a leader, it's going to have pretty quick impact. It's easy to become a more empowering leader. It's relatively quick work, and it will have pretty fast impact. This is a group profile of a church, of a group. So you can get these tests you can do at the individual level and at the group level. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a sec. So the 3 dimensions of leadership are explanation, motivation, and liberation, which I talked about a little bit before. And so the green tends to be the cognitive side in all of our tests. Motivation, Jesus said to go do stuff. That tends to be sort of the hands area of us, and the heart experiential, emotional side tends to be the bluer side. And so teach the principles. This is part of what explaining is. As an empowering leader, I teach the principles. I focus on strengths and I release people. I permit mistakes. So I let them go. Go give it a whirl. Give it a try. You're strong. You've got it. And we've done some training. What's interesting here, though, is that every one of these can be overdone. So if I'm imbalanced green, I will become the guru or the expert because I'll explain everything, and I know everything, and I know how to teach it to you. If I'm a motivator, I can overdo motivating to the place where I become a driver. It's like, come on, let's go. Come on, let's go. Come on, let's go. And the comrade side, it's yes, you can make some mistakes. Oh, come on, let's go make some mistakes. And oh, here, I'll do your work for you. You don't even, it's just too laissez-faire. And so that idea that we can come from a place of imbalance towards, and so how do we get more balance? We need to sort of work on both empowering and leading. So for those of you who've taken the test already, you'll have seen that it produces your results on both halves. And so it's interesting, Christian took the Trinitarian compass and it wasn't split down the middle and it wasn't split across the middle. It was interesting that in the empowering areas of the compass were sort of in the top left and the more leading ones were down in the redder zone. So teach the principles has a corresponding pair. It has the empowering side of it is teach the principles. The leading one is model the principles. So, and we call that training, that pair. Focus on strengths has a corresponding pair called assess weaknesses. We call that capacity. Learn from mistakes is the corresponding pairing to permit mistakes. So learn from mistakes is leading. Permitting mistakes is empowering. And if you think of empowering as sort of the arm around and around the shoulder and leading as the sort of maybe even pushing. And so that's called experimentation. Advocate bold moves and nurture steady progress. There are lots of people who will say, wow, leadership's all about bold moves. You're the new CEO. You've got to set the vision. You've got to say, we're going to do big things. But then other people will say, no, it's incremental. And what we would argue is it's both. Progression is both big stuff and little stuff. And as I say, release a vision of others and cast a vision. The new CEO of the bank comes in, his very first job's create a vision. Or the new pastor arrives at the church, cast a vision. And people will be sitting around saying, we're waiting for you to cast the vision. But it's also releasing the vision of others. And so these 6 pairs, the last pair is analyze present situation and set goals. And so, I was just working with someone recently and it was about this. Yes, I can analyze the present situation and I'm very clear on where we are and where you are in your job, but I'm having a hard time setting goals with you or for you and so on. So you don't have to remember all the language here, but I want you to remember that there's an empowering wing, there's a leading wing, and all 6 aspects have a leading wing and an empowering wing. And so training, capacity, experimentation, progression, vision, and strategy are the 6 core elements to empowerment. When you get your results back from the empowerment test, it scores you on all 6 and shows you the relative balance within each. And then there's an advanced profile that takes you right down inside. Just like the NCD Church survey, it goes right down to the question level. So this person has an overall score of 56. That means they're slightly above the median for the cohort that's in the database. They're slightly more empowering than they are leading. So they average out at 56, but they're stronger empowering than they are in leading. And then you go down into their 6th. This person scores lowest on experimentation with a score of 47. As you can see, their learn from mistakes and I would argue that this is one of the big hangups in the church, is we either don't permit mistakes or we don't learn from them. Oh, we did something, but we don't want to talk about it. We'll just do something different. And then we'll try something else if we'll bother to try to do anything else, but we won't learn from it. But this is an individual's profile. That's a real whirlwind quick tour through the empowering leadership stuff. We have an empowering leadership course that some of you some people on the screen have been through this course. It consists of 6 weekly 1-hour sessions with a trainer and a small group of about 6 to 8 people. And then each person gets ongoing follow-up using their empowerment test. So I just want to ask a few of, how many people have taken that? Shane, Elizabeth, and Dawn. Any comments on the course? Good or bad? You know, what you got from it? Any three of you?
I thought it was helpful. I'm just looking at the results as if my face looked a bit glicket. I was just looking, and it does all kind of tie together in an interesting way, sort of. Yeah, it was a good thing to do. But we had a conversation in one of the breakout rooms I was in with, where we're saying you can not fix it, but you can tweak the results by the group you ask for results, because we're just saying how you're a different person in different environments, and so they experience your leadership in different ways, and so yeah,
Absolutely.
that was an interesting aspect of it. So choose wisely who you ask.
Yeah, I've done the test a couple of times in the last couple of years and was selective about who I chose to provide their feedback into the test. Not because I was trying to tweak the results, but because I was trying to get a perspective from a different kind of group. So one group that is more intimately involved with me in some leadership things, and another group that's a little bit broader. And so that's helpful. But the course is very useful. And I've also been participating in some follow-up change talks or coaching sessions after that, which really provides an opportunity to dive a little bit deeper into, okay, how am I going to take what I've learned and apply this? So the coaching sessions are really good.
Dawn, you had your mic off.
Yeah, I think it's really useful, and the coaching sessions afterwards are probably the most useful thing, because it enables you to dig down into, what the results are. But you definitely have to be cognizant of the fact that who you pick will shape your results. So some of the people I picked were people who'd known me in former churches where I was the second chair and not the lead. And it's very interesting as to how much you empower or lead depending upon where you are in the leadership structure. So if you are the leader de facto and the buck stops with you, then by the nature of it, I think you can be more leading and less empowering in that sense. But if you're always having to answer to the first chair, as it were, then you can end up empowering, because actually it's not always your job to be the leading. So the results are really worthwhile, but you've got to take them contextually, I think.
Yeah.
If that's fair.
Yeah, and I think of some of the cases where people have said, gee, I wish I'd chosen my people differently. They're still good enough to be helpful. And then take the test again. And you don't have to do the test. I mean, they only cost £5 or eight Canadian. They're not frightfully expensive. And some of your denominations will pay for them as you take them. If you go in to buy one test from NCD Life, it'll look like they cost $12 or £10 or something like that, but they don't have to cost that much. So I encourage you to take the test more than once, and certainly within 6 months if you want to. There was something else you said there, Dawn, about typically I encourage people to go with people that know you pretty well. They don't necessarily direct report to you. Some of you don't have any direct reports, so you're going to have to pick people that you have influence on. One of the things Adam said, I was going to show you the video, but it's 11 minutes long, so I didn't. Maybe I'll send it out, and then you can decide whether you want to invest the 11 minutes. But it's Adam talking about the empowerment test, and I think it's a brilliant. It's just a little conversation he and I were having. I thought he really put a whole lot of interesting stuff into it. But one of the things he says is when you're thinking about who to invite your best followers. And it really, there's some scriptural support for that. Jesus worked with the people who were his best followers. The people who wouldn't follow, he kind of didn't work with them. And it's like, And I'm guessing there's some of you who are thinking, oh, golly, I'd love to get rid of some of the people that won't follow me very well. I get that. But when you're thinking about what's the best picture of your empowering leadership, it's the people that follow you best. And maybe there's a lot to be said, and he actually says it in the video. We spend a lot of energy trying to get people to follow us who won't. And we shouldn't be wasting the energy on them. And that sounds a little counter to the culture that we've been trying to build in churches, but maybe it needs to be. Anyway, I don't want you firing all your parishioners that you can't stand, or that won't follow you. But the principle there, I think, is a really helpful one, and modeling ourselves after Jesus. Okay, let's keep going. I think I made up some time there, Shane.
We're ahead.
Yeah, we're going to talk about spiritual change talk a little longer, but we use this. So if you have a copy of the 3 Colors of Leadership, you will see in the back there's something called spiritual change talk, and it's taking the NCD growth cycle, which you've been exposed to in session 2 and 3, I think, or 2, and applying it at the individual level. And so, we'll spend a whole course on that someday, talking about how the Trinitarian compass and the cycle get applied at the individual level. But for now, if you have the book or you have a copy of the 3 Colors of Community, the change talk, spiritual change talk stuff is in there as well. This applying the cycle to my growth progression. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. So this slide, really busy, don't pay much attention to it, but what it's trying to say is, not only can you use this as a leader, you can use it with a leadership team. So each leader becomes a more empowering leader, but the leadership team can also become a more empowering leadership team. And so all of the 3 color tests, I want to step out of this one in specifics and go to the broader category of 3 color discipleship tests. All of them can be used in group settings and can be rolled up and consolidated into group profiles and used for the development of the group and the individuals within it. But this one, when you think of leadership teams, I think this is one of the best tools we have around for group use. And then you can see here, so here's the lowest responses these are empowering quality characteristics in the cyan or blue, and the questions from the test that are leading wing questions. So for instance, this is an experimentation learn from mistakes questions. Leaders in this group get frustrated by people who are unwilling to learn. What I love about this test is it identifies who's got the highest score. There's somebody in our group who scores 49 on this. Over here, this is an area where we need to work. In their feedback, leaders in this group are absolutely honest rather than just friendly or polite. But we do have someone who is stronger in this. So while I'm coaching this team, or let's say it's my own team, and I'm self-coaching this team, I'm going to make sure I try to find out who is that, because it doesn't identify me who the person in the group is that has a score of 60 on this. Although I do see over on the left-hand side, who are the people that I could work with and lead from. But I'm going to try to make sure in the work that we do, I'm going to make sure I find out who's got 60 in this question about giving honest feedback, because I want to hear from them. And I'll bet you it's going to be the person we typically don't hear from in this group. So it's one of the things I love about this test is it will help us. If I find the person who scored 24 on this question, I'm going to say, maybe you don't need to talk for a minute or two while we hear from the person who got 60. And so it's helping bring out the strength that's already in the group. So a lot of verbiage about using this as a group profile. So we're going to go into another breakout. When you look at the 3 color test, in particular the wholeness and empowerment test, where might you start using them in your ministry? So maybe you'll start using them on your own. Maybe you'll start using them in your small group, or in your leadership team, or your vestry, or your council, or et cetera. Might it be modeling change to your team, using them in a group or team setting, or congregation wide? So Shane's going to put you into groups again. And I think we're going to be 7 minutes plus a bonus minute. So we didn't ask you, or we didn't remind you to assign a spokesperson, but I'm hoping everybody did. Group 3, Dominic, Elizabeth, Ricardo, did you have a spokesperson? Who is it? It's not
It's Ricardo.
Oh,
Ricardo.
sorry. sorry. Uh, yeah, so I think what we did, I think both of us, all three of us, were kind of just kind of really reflective on everything. Some of us probably expressed that we would like to retake the tests and just kind of really take the results at face value, kind of like what you recommend, Bill. Is that it's not the tested results is not the essence of who we are. It's just like a suggestion about how we do leadership and how we can actually pivot if we take it seriously. For some of us, I think we struggle to figure out probably how we can make it practical. Because for some of us, it might seem a bit abstract how to take this and say, how do we implement this? I know one of us said that we've never been in a leadership position, so it's really hard to say how that would look for them. But in all, I think we do see the value in the test, but it's just how we receive it, how we look at the interpretations and stuff like that.
Good. Well, Group 2, Don, Joe, Steve.
That would be me. This time the lot fell on me. It was mentioned that it's nice to see where we complement each other in our ministry, so that, I'm not strong on whatever organising, but somebody else is, and so on. So that was mentioned, and also the balance between the empowering wing and the leadership wing was seen as important. And I think that was because I was saying this is recorded, so there you go. That because Salvation Army is hierarchical in its makeup, I have issues with how discipleship and accountability works well within that setting, when a lot of the time it's a management organized thing. And so I've got issues with that, and so I'm definitely more on the empowering wing side of the equation rather than the leadership, but they need to obviously work together as well. Another thing that one person mentioned, need to mention this because it's not directly applicable to what we're talking about, but it was a light bulb moment for someone who said it's better to work with followers than resistant people, and that's something that as I say, it was a light bulb moment, so it's an important part of the discussion that we've had. My other point would be that I'd like to work with someone else with my wholeness test results, so that we could each work with each other and help each other to understand the results of the test, to find that extra nuance rather than seeing it as a black and white thing.
Thanks, Steve. And Group 1, Darren, Doug, Jane, Ruben. Who's speaking for that group today, this time? Darren and Ruben are looking back and forth at each other.
Yeah, go on, Darren. Go on.
We felt that existing teams probably less useful if you know each other really, really well in some ways, especially some of the stuff that you're speaking about in some of the tests. If it's a team that's just been coming together, maybe it would work in a way in which was more useful. And probably the only other thing that we did say was we weren't quite sure how it was going to work in a wider congregation setting if we did all three things all at the same time to try and do that. So they were probably, in a nutshell, our conversation, I think.
Anybody in group one want to add to? No, you're getting thumbs up there from Jane. Darren, I think you did okay. And Doug. Just a couple of things to follow up. If any of you are interested in teaming up with someone else in this cohort to work on your wholeness test or your empowerment test and sort of mutually mentor one another, just drop me a note and I'll put you in touch with each other. And if only one person does, I'll work with you. The thing that came up that I think we've never talked about, but is always in the background, is denominational culture. I mean, if you're working in an Anglican setting or an Army setting or an Adventist setting or a Baptist setting or a Pentecostal setting, there's going to be stuff in that culture that brings life, but let's be honest, there will be stuff that impedes the light from getting through. And so sometimes, whether you're doing the church survey or you're doing the empowerment test, you're going to bump up against that culture. You can't help that. It's the culture you live in and work within. And so sometimes it's, okay, I can't fix that. I can't change that. One of the things Christian talks about in the empowerment book is recognizing the impediments that you can't do anything about and accepting them or working around them or whatever it is you do. I mean, you can only work on the things you can have influence on. And that might sound sort of duh, but it's important. And sometimes, I'm thinking back to the church survey specifically, sometimes when we name barriers to growth, that some of those may be the culture we live in. They might be denominational culture. They might even be congregational culture. And so, how you poke away at those or peck away at them, there's only so much you can do sometimes. And so, yeah, I'm thinking, I know most of your denominations reasonably well, and they all have their thing for sure. The other thing, just about trying to do all these tests at the congregational level, I wouldn't start there. I've been talking to Doug about trying to find a couple of churches in Belfast that would do the church survey and then have all 30 people also do the wholeness test. I would love to find a church where I could get the 30 people or the 40 people, whatever it is, the 30 people who take the church survey also do the wholeness test, because I'd love to find a church where I could make the correlation between the two and see how exactly well they do pair up. Does it show up green red in this survey, and does it show up green red in this one? So if any of you have a church, I'd like to do that, but it's a lot. I mean, people have survey fatigue anyway, and some people don't trust surveys, and they don't like structure, or they don't like being told they're in a box. There's all sorts of resistance. So trying to find a church that could do a whole bunch of tests. However, if you're in a church where you're doing the church survey, and you could find 4 or 5 people who might do the wholeness test, or 4 or 5 people who might do the empowering leadership test, that might be cool. Just to flesh out that sense of who are we and build self-awareness. So don't burden yourself or your people with trying to do too many surveys or tests. Pick and choose for sure. But I do want you to know that they're available and helpful. Okay. Thank you for all of that really awesome feedback. I just want to talk to you a little bit about change talk for a moment. And this is how we apply the cycle at the individual level, well, and or at the small group level, but let's say at the individual level at this point. So if you take the empowerment test or the empowering leadership course, you would be walked through the change talk, which is really just being mentored to use the cycle to work on your empower results. So the vision question. So you see there the 6 orange circles: vision, experimentation, capacity, strategy, training, and progression. Those are the 6 pairings of attributes. So there's a leading wing and an empowering wing to vision. So at the first session, we would start at vision, and we would talk through your release the vision of other questions and your casting vision questions. from the survey. And that might be your number one area, or it might be your number three, or it might be your number six. Regardless, we'll work through that. And then next month, we'll come to the experimentation questions. So permit mistakes and learn from mistakes and work through those, and what can you do about them, and so on for over 6 months. So you take the course for 6 weeks with a small group. It's online. There's a bit of pre-watching to do, some videos. There's opportunity to speak into the group's progress through the course. And then you take these 6 months of one-on-one coaching. The spiritual change talk is not restricted to that program, though. It comes out of the book, The Three Colors of Your Spiritual, or the three Colors of Leadership. And change talk starts on page 99. So a person can work through that this cycle by themselves, or with a mentor, or with a mutual mentor, and so on. So if there's someone who wants to work through their empowerment test results, there's a variety of different ways you can do it. But this is the way to do it. How you team up with somebody or don't, it is separate. I just want to stop and talk about spiritual change talk with a couple of people I hope are willing to share their experience of it. Shane and Dawn, you've kind of already intimated that what do we, anything more specific now that we've sort of looked at that slide specifically about your experience of going through spiritual change talk with a mentor?
Yeah, it's really helpful to have the chance to kind of dive into each of the wings. So the way it's structured is that you've got a session that kind of focuses on each wing pair, and really about asking good questions that help unpack from within yourself the recognition of traits that are particularly strong, and what are appropriate ways that I might feel called to react to the things that have opportunities to develop. So it's really like sitting down with a friend and having a good conversation with some helpful questions. For me, it hasn't felt, intrusive, or it really feels like I've been leading it. But somebody there who can help peel back some layers that I might not be able to see or recognize all by myself. So it's really been helpful from that perspective, and also helping to figure out, what aspects of the feedback do you want to take and do something about, and which are the aspects of the feedback that comes through the test that you want to say, isn't that interesting? But not necessarily feel compelled to, fix it if it's not really something that in the context is something that really needs fixing. As some people have been reflecting about, who you get the feedback from can influence your results, which can be helpful, but also doesn't compel you to react to all of that feedback all at the same time.
Sounds a little bit like spiritual direction.
A little bit, yeah. It certainly has some similarities there, but really certainly spirit led, but really also very tangible and practical, and there's accountability aspects to those talks as well. So sometimes it helps me when I commit to what I'm going to do and then anticipate a future conversation about that. So it's been helpful to motivate me and hold me accountable to things that I want to work on.
Don, anything to add to all that?
No, I think Shane summed up pretty well. Nice.
Okay, good. Great. Okay, we're drawing to a close here now. The which 3 color tests should I take? I have taken all 8 tests. I've got 2 or 3 people who have. I've now fed the results of my 8 tests into AI to get a bit of a overview of the 8. for several years when we didn't have all eight, I kept saying to Christian and Adam, what are we going to do when we get all eight? Little did we know that we'd have AI by the time it came. And so that integrating them across, and it's actually spit out a 28 days of discipleship development plan for me. And one of the things I was hearing when Shane was talking about his experience of change talk, it doesn't feel negative and like, oh, you dirty rotten sinner, or you lousy leader, or it's just an invitation into become an even better leader. So it all feels really helpful to me. So you might take the test that corresponds to your church's minimum factor. You might do one of the ones that you're most energized about. Like I've got a friend, Frank, who just loves the love test. I think he's taken it like 5 times. He just loves loving relationships. That's the discipleship area he's most intrigued by, and he loves doing that test. Or it relates to your wholeness cloud. Your wholeness cloud has suggested X, and therefore you want to work on that. Maybe embracing relationships is the thing that is not coming as strongly for you, so you do the love test or the wholeness, the inspiration, the community test, etc. So there's a variety of different ways you can think through which would be the next test for me. And you might, even in your own churches, when you're working with some of your people, if they're thinking, I might like be interested in that, might be some of the ways you could coach them, counsel them a little bit. So today's checkout, we have 4 minutes. What's been something that you're taking from today in a word or a phrase? What's the most important thing you've taken from today's session? And I'm going to ask people in order, and you can pass if you've got nothing to add, rather than you inviting people. This is a different way of doing check-ins and checkouts. So I'm going to start with you, Doug. A word or a phrase about something today.
I want to learn more about empowerment, leadership.
Okay. Steve, I'm going to go to you next, and then I'll do Elizabeth.
Want to thinking about the wholeness test. Use the word nuance a few too many times, but yeah, digging into what that actually means, not just for myself, but like you say, for others, because it's a cloud that affects other people as well. Sorry, that's a few too many words.
Okay, Elizabeth, and then Jane.
I'm going to give myself a break.
Okay. Jane, and then Dominique.
I think again, it's just the interconnectedness of the Trinitarian wheel and just how it all fits together. It's quite intriguing and seems to work well.
Okay. Thank you. Dominic, then Joe.
I think looking at practical application of some of this, which seems quite abstract.
Again, yes.
Joe, then Ruben.
The practical application, how it really can work.
Ruben, then Ricardo.
Clouds have words on the top and underneath.
Clouds and shadows. Ricardo, then Darren.
I'm also just really fascinated by the whole Trinitarian concept as well. Yeah, I would just really like to go over it again to let it resonate. Sorry, it's too many words.
Okay. Darren, then Henry, if Henry's still there.
I think still trying to bring team together in this way.
Okay. Henry, are you still there? Yeah.
I'm here. Expend more energy on followers and less on the resistant.
Cool. And Dawn.
I think for me, it was having started working in a new team. For me, I'm interested to see how this could enhance the way we work together as a team. Actually really knowing each other's strengths, and just not being afraid to lean on one another in that.
No. Shane?
Move to the light.
And what have I taken from today? Yeah, I think the interconnectedness. Every time I do something in the Trinitarian compass and see how it all fits together, I'm just renews my I guess my faith in NCD, but my faith in God. I mean, God is the Trinity, and the massively different number of ways He works in and through us. It's just staggering. We are so wondrously made, and so differently and uniquely made. So, and we need each other, and so this is a good way to find how to work well together. So thank you for your participation today. We have one more session next week. We'll send out, we're also going to send out the intro deck that we talked about, I think last time, or maybe it was one of the other sessions that you can use when you're introducing NCD to churches or parts of it, if you like. You're welcome to use any of the PowerPoint slides you want from any of the decks. So if you want to use them, feel free to. I'm going to pray. Father, thank you for the chance to be together again. We thank you that we can always be connected to you. The only thing that can, well, nothing can separate us from you, but sometimes we can feel like we're separated from you because of the barriers that we put in the way or others put in the way for us. And so we want to remove them, the ones we can, and learn how to accept the ones we can't. And so we pray for your Spirit to guide us in that discernment phase of figuring out who we are, what we are, why we have meaning, how we have meaning together, how we connect with each other, all the ways that you've built us to be and to become. And so we thank you for that. Thank you for the revelations that each of us may have had, that your Spirit will grow those and take what we've done. We've brought our loaves and fishes to you, and we want you to multiply them. Amen. Blessings, everybody.